Hey, welcome back to Cream City Dreams. It's the podcast about Milwaukee women, and I am your host, Megan Schultz, and we are in a little interlude right now, a tiny mini-series. We just wrapped up the season 7 in April, all about women who've made incredible pivots in their lives to get them where they're at, and I'll be jumping right into a summer of joy, because we need some joy right now, and there are lots of women bringing the joy in Milwaukee. But before I do that, a short 4-parter every Wednesday in May, all about attention, our attention, where we put it, who gets it, who doesn't get it, who steals it, what steals it. And in fact, we're focusing specifically, yep, you guessed it, technology, screens, computers, watches, games, all the things that keep us and our eyes glued to a screen instead of to the world around us. I hope you'll stick with me for this 4-parter where I don't introduce a new woman every week, although I am bringing on a friend and clinical psychologist to talk about this with me, to break it down, to get real with what's going on inside our heads, inside our minds, and how we can control where we put our attention instead of letting all of the things out there control us. If you have been telling yourself you need a break or a detox or a digital vacation, this is a series you don't want to miss. Today on the podcast, something new, something exciting, honestly, something a little scary and a little different than my usual seasons. Today, I am talking with Thekla Brumder Ross, and Thekla is a friend, a fellow mom. Our kids are at the same school. She is a clinical psychologist, an addiction specialist, a self-compassion and mindfulness instructor, and maybe most importantly, a fellow human walking alongside this strange path we call the 21st century with all its pitfalls and potholes and temptations and vices. And here specifically, I'm talking about screens, phones, watches, game consoles, social media platforms, and all of the things that lead us down rabbit holes and lure our attention from the present moment and distract us from living with intention and focus, right? I feel like I just want to pause and take a breath here. Welcome, Thekla.
Oh, Megan, thank you so much for having me. I am a Cream City Dreams groupie, and I adore you. And I just want to start with gratitude and appreciation for who you are as a person and how you show up in our community as a fellow mom and as a podcaster and as a woman, just bringing awareness and curiosity and connection across our community. It's really, we'll get into that. It's really lacking these days. And you cultivate that in who you are as a person, and you model that for your kids and for all of our kids. My kids see it in you, and I'm just deeply grateful for who you are and what you do in our community. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Thekla. I did not ask her to say that,
No,
listeners.
she did not.
But well, I'm really excited to begin this mini session in the month of May, which is kind of timely because this week is actually National Screen Free Week, where hundreds of thousands of people around the US, maybe even around the world, are taking a break and pushing pause and setting their phones down. So I think it's a really great week to start this 4-part series on effectively what I think, I mean, I sort of in my head was calling it screens and digital detox and all that, but it's really about attention. Right? I mean, it's really about where we focus. It's not so much about the detox or the withdrawal, but like where we put our attention and what takes our attention, what steals our attention, right?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I think we're having a conversation about awareness.
Yes.
And reclaiming connection with ourselves.
Yes.
But we're doing it in the context of having this conversation around technology. And
yes.
So I couldn't agree more. That's really what we're talking about.
Yes. Well, and before we dive into this conversation, I want to focus my attention, no pun intended, on you and introducing you to listeners who might not be familiar with you and your background. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are in terms of work, both, as a clinical psychologist and also as an advisor to to the tech companies and that work that you do.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let me just start where you started with my humanity, which is I am an imperfect human showing up in that space. I am a mother, a partner, a sister, a daughter, a friend, a community member, and I really, really consider myself a citizen of the world, and I try and cultivate that. And you'll hear a little bit about that in my journey and how I got here. But I grew up in Milwaukee and I left for a little over 20 years and recently came back. So I am rediscovering this beautiful city that I grew up in that feels like a new place for me, which is really fun as an adult and a professional in this world. Growing up, my mom was a public and MPS school teacher, and my mom taught mindfulness before any of us were even talking about mindfulness. She taught it in a class called Life Skills to third, fourth, and fifth graders. And it used to be called Home Economics, but she renamed it Life Skills. So I have to attribute so much of my love of this area to my mom and gratitude for her and to my dad. My dad has been in recovery most of my life, and I am surrounded by, whether you see it as a gift or not, I do. I have mental illness and addiction on both sides of my family, all over. And that's what brought me to the field of psychology. I read the Psychology 101 book in high school, and I thought, oh my gosh, they wrote a book about my family. That's so kind of them. And it really looped me in, and I kind of never looked back. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I have a PsyD, which is a doctorate in clinical psychology. And I did a bunch of different training in my doctorate program with adolescents and children and adults. And at my postdoc year, you get this opportunity to go in a full fellowship and decide, like, where do you really want to dive deep in your clinical rotation and training? And I sort of thought I was going to go on this path of working at Oakland's Children's Hospital. I trained in San Francisco. And I had worked in the San Francisco County Jail, and then maybe I was going to go, into forensics. And I had this inner calling of like, there's no way that I can be a clinical psychologist without getting more training in the disease of addiction. I just can't. I can't. And so I applied to a postdoctoral program at Kaiser Addiction Medicine Recovery Services in the heart of San Francisco. I fell in love with my supervisor and the other postdocs. And I made a really difficult decision to turn completely in a different direction and go towards adults and adolescents and youth and families and addiction medicine. And it transformed my life. I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't made that pivot. I just said to my husband yesterday after coming home from a program at our kids' school that I am so grateful to have experienced being in the rooms of recovery and all that addiction medicine has taught me and recovery has taught me about life. Sure, cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy and all the evidence-based psychotherapies, you'll hear this about me in my career, are important, but so much of what I've learned through recovery. And you'll hear a weaving of that. So just to be clear, I'm not in recovery myself, but I'm been surrounded by it by working clinically with the disease of addiction. I worked for Kaiser for 14 years. Kaiser Permanente, it's a large HMO health maintenance organization, California, Colorado, Washington, and the East Coast. And I was both a clinician, a researcher, and then I implemented evidence-based practices across the entire enterprise. And one of the things I did was implement alcohol as a vital sign. So I trained all of the physicians and medical assistants and nurses how to screen for alcohol, just like you do for cholesterol and blood pressure and all the other vital signs, but really putting alcohol and alcohol use alongside those other vital signs. And empowered patients in addiction medicine recovery services to take a leading role in their overall health and have a positive interaction with the healthcare system, because as you very well know, they're often a stigmatized population. So that area, addiction, you'll hear it come up in our conversation around digital resilience. But I also did additional training in compassion and altruism. I've been leading support groups for abortion providers, both domestically and internationally, since early career, so over 15 years. I teach self-compassion to medical students right now in Milwaukee through the Health Equity Scholars Program, an incredible program at the Medical College of Wisconsin. these incredible 6 students who I call them my teachers, even though I'm their teacher. We
Mm.
really get to practice together in life, and they are true leaders in our community, and you'll see them be leaders in the years to come. So I'm excited to work with them and be a part of their lives.
Mm.
Um, and a couple other fun and exciting things going on in the career. But right now, I am a consultant and strategic advisor for NIH, the National Institute of Health, on the drug and alcohol side. And I advise, as you said, some tech companies in the behavioral health and what I call social health space and social capital space, which we can get into as we move forward in our discussions. So,
Wow.
yeah.
How do you fit all that into the hours of the day?
I was talking to my friend who is a coach. She's amazing and a dear friend, and we were talking about when you love what you do, how do you not become addicted to your job? And so that's a
Mm.
real conversation that we continue to practice. She and I are both dedicated healers in the sense that we do the work that we practice. And so we're constantly testing and trying out, where do we need to create opportunity and spaciousness for ourselves. And you'll hear in this discussion that we talk about today around digital health, I am equally as vulnerable to all of what we're talking about, and I need to practice all of the things that we
Hmm.
are talking about. So, as I said, I'm imperfect and I'm not immune to any of this.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I'm so, I think, looking forward to this month of talking with you and just reflecting on it because I feel like in my inbox every day is at least like 5 emails from experts on, whether it's Carol Dweck or Jean Twenge, I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, or Jonathan Haidt, or, all these people who right now, like in the zeitgeist, it's out there, this screens and talking about attention and stuff. And it's nice to hear real people. Not that they're not real people, but they are like super experts, right? And so it's like, let's just be real for just a minute and talk about how hard this is.
Oh my gosh, you're 100%. And Megan, this came up in a conversation, and we'll talk about our community that we have around digital literacy at our school. But this conversation came up yesterday that for a while we thought about the world of psychology and these experts who like knew about it from their research and their studying. But so much of this is also what we live and what we experience in our lived experience. And there is clinical wisdom in lived experience. Let me say that again. There is deep clinical wisdom in lived experience. So I'm
Yes.
excited to get into that. Of course, we will talk about the science and the neuroscience and the psychology behind all of this, but don't ever lose sight of that lived experience. And to all your listeners who are listening right now, like that is we want to hear that. We want your feedback. And we want to know what your lived experience is around this very topic.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I was trying to think as I was thinking about introducing you, I was thinking about how we met. And I think it was at a PTO meeting, wasn't it? A parent
Yes.
teacher
Yes.
organization meeting. And I started a digital literacy committee at our school last year because selfishly, I always start the things that I need the most, right? And I was feeling like I needed help in how to approach screens and screen time with my kids. And so I wanted to see what other families were doing, how they did it. I thought maybe this committee could bring in resources and experts, and we could have conversations around this, both to normalize the conversation and also to help hold each other accountable as parents on this track or on this parenting journey. And in all honesty, I wanted somebody to tell me what to do because I was struggling. So I was so delighted when we met at this meeting and found out that this is actually a specialty of yours. I was like, ding, 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 Thekla, I got a committee for you. um, but damn it, if you didn't give me the concrete answers I needed. I'm just kidding. But pretty early on in our committee, we had this aha moment, I feel like, and you were a part of that, where we decided that before we turned the finger on our kids and told them this is what you need to do, or only 45 minutes a day, or whatever the American Pediatric Association says, we kind of dropped that for a bit and took a breath and just said, I think we maybe need to focus on us and our screen use before we turn the finger at our kids, and we need to look inward before we look at them and look at our own relationships to our devices and these things we hold and carry with us all the time. And so you and I had, and along with the committee who helped us organize this, we had a parent night for our families back in January, and probably, I don't know, 25, 30 folks showed up. And it was a really generative conversation, I thought, about what's happening in real life, in real time with screens. And I think, I guess I didn't realize how fruitful that conversation about looking inward was going to be for other people. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Did you sense that, like, whoa, this hit home, or this hit something?
I have to tell you about my anxiety when you initially asked me to join the group because I had this deep, I'm a new mom at this school and I want to be involved, but where do I fit in? And all of this, and I'm not on social media, which we'll get to. So I'm like, where am I going to fit in? And what? And when you asked to join this group, I'm like, well, I focus more on addiction around adult behavior and around our adult use to this slot machine 24/7 in the palm of our hand, but not kids. And so when we had that aha moment in the meeting, when I said, well, there are three fingers pointing back at us and the one finger pointing at the kids, telling them what to do. Like, don't you think we should talk about our own behavior before we talk about theirs? And that aha, I was like, oh, I can do that. I can turn inward and I can focus on, because we have these really beautiful, and we'll talk about this in the brain sciences, these beautiful mirror neurons that we're showing our kids all the time, which is modeling the behavior we want to see in our kids. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we forget that our behavior, as hard as it is as parents, is just this model for them. And so how we interact with our technology and our phones is modeling a message to our kids, whether we want it or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were nervous. Like, did other parents want to show up in this way and turn inward and ask this question? And what we found was really, truly profound. We had this beautiful fireside chat, and we talked a little bit about self-compassion and the brain science and what the phone's doing to our brains. And then we had this conversation, this generative conversation you said about turning inward. And is social media enhancing our well-being? Is the phone enhancing our well-being? Or do we feel overwhelmed and disconnected, not only to ourselves, but to others and our planet and all
Mm-hmm.
of it? And the answer was like a resounding yes. And the tone of this discussion was not prescriptive. We came in with curiosity and non-judgment. And as you said, Megan, you were like, I created this group because I wanted to talk to other people who were also struggling. So we
Mm-hmm.
came in with this like, hey, let's just be curious about what all these technologies are doing to us as adults, and
Yes.
then how that's impacting our behavior that we're modeling for our kids. So before we point the finger at them, let's take an inventory, as we like to say in the rooms of recovery, an inventory of our own behavior and what's going on with us, and get really curious and aware about it. And then we can start having the conversation as a family and collectively and empower them. So just kudos to all of the incredible parents who showed up at that parent night, willing to like be vulnerable with a bunch
Yes.
of other parents they may or may not know, and admit where tech was either enhancing or detracting from their well-being, and be able to examine it together. It was pretty profound.
Yes. Yeah. And I have to admit, before that meeting, I was just a smidge doubtful is the wrong word, but I love woo. Like, give me the woo woo anytime, and I am there. I'm down for that conversation. But I was like, is this going to be a little too woo for the people, for parents, And it was. I'm trying to remember if it was the gender split, if it was moms and dads, or
It
I'm not.
was pretty
It
even.
was
Yeah.
pretty. It felt pretty split between men and women, and they got down and they got into it. Like, the discussion was so, maybe from the dads especially, it was like, whoa, this is incredible that you guys are going deep. And I don't know why I would doubt that in men. Men can go deep, but I don't know. I just usually talk about the woo stuff with ladies,
With
right?
the women.
But it was really insightful to me, showing that this is the conversation that we need to be having right now. In addition, yes, parents are going to keep coming to these nights because they are eventually going to hope we talk about the kids and what they do at home and how we manage that screen time and rules and all that stuff at home. And we'll get there. But I think the fact that we started with this and that it was so embraced at that meeting just told me that this is a conversation that we need to be having.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And you're so right. Like the men showing up, there isn't a lot of spaces for men in midlife to show up in that vulnerable way. And so I just feel like we created a little bit of space and they answered the call.
Yes.
Um, I would be remiss to not make the parallel to, when we were growing up, you and I had DARE, programs against drugs telling us not to use, drugs and alcohol. And a lot of this is around also just waking up and saying, okay, so if this is the drug of our time, really, to
Mm,
be honest, and we're pointing the finger, thank you, Jonathan Haidt and your team, and Tobias Stone Rockwell, and all these incredible authors who are waking us up to children and what technology is doing to them and their developing brains and policy around that. Thank you so much. Like, we need to be having those conversations. But are we also having the conversations around our own adult behavior and our relationship to technology, just like we did around drugs and alcohol?
mm,
Are we modeling the kind of relationship with drugs and alcohol that we want for our kids? That's a
right.
question. That's a curious question for folks. And so we're just expanding the conversation to
Yes.
technology.
Yeah. And hopefully doing it better this time around with the facts that we know that about how DARE didn't really work very well, did it?
No, it
So,
didn't. It didn't. It really didn't.
so
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully these conversations are more fruitful and more
Hmm.
beneficial and have the results that we're hoping for, which is to say that we all understand how to control our attention and not let our attention be controlled by all these things, right?
Yeah.
How to make sure that that is our responsibility.
Our responsibility. Can I say we sent out a survey before folks came to this parent night? And we were really curious, like, are you coming with the perspective of social media and technology really enhances my well-being? It is my go-to well-being expert. Um, or is it detracting? And what we saw was kind of quite amazing. A lot of people even answered the survey like, no, it's not enhancing my well-being, and no, it's social media is not adding to my well-being. And then the discussion that followed was so rich because people may have answered yes or no, but then they really like unpacked the why behind that. So, if it's helpful to the audience, I thought I'd give a few examples of
Mm,
some of the topics that came up. I can remember one of the dads saying, I'm on my culinary apps all the time, going through looking at all these recipes when really I used to cook in community with my family and with my friends, and now I'm solo alone scrolling. And that's just sort of awareness. Like, it wasn't a judgment, it was just like noticing, oh, this used to
mm,
be this beautiful hobby I had with others, and connection, and now it's solo on my phone. And others just talking about like the habit formation that we have, this pull to just like pick up our phone in any moment of downtime. I can hear the voice and see the face of the mom who said, I'm just not going to pick up my phone. I'm going to go hug my kid. And like the
mm,
simplicity of that, of like, oh, I could resist that temptation, create some awareness of like, is that what I want to connect with, my phone, or do I want to go connect with my kid?
mm.
There was so much other wisdom that came out of that evening, but I just thought it'd be fun to share a few.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's what I'm hoping that we'll do in the course of these next 3 weeks is to break that down a little more. So, break down the conversation that we had in that meeting over the course of 3 podcasts, where we talk a little bit about the brain next week and what's going on in the brain with all this. When we pick up that phone and we see that red dot, what's going on in there? Because I think knowing that and knowing how they're controlling our brains is really helpful to then make the right moves to separate from that or take a pause, as this mom was doing in that moment. And then to talk more about self compassion and what that looks like, and mindfulness and being present and mindful in those moments when we're tempted at a stoplight or in the grocery store line or whatever to pick up our phones. And then hopefully by the fourth week, we can talk about some ways to move forward, some helpful suggestions of alternatives or other things that can be put in place, or other habits or other ways of being in relationship with that, because let's face it, it's not, I can't just chuck my phone into Lake Michigan. It's not going anywhere. I've got to carpool. I've got to, I've got to maintain the relationships that I do have through the phone sometimes. But how can we do things just a little differently so that we feel better about them? So I am looking forward to kind of fleshing this conversation out as the weeks go on. And I will be honest, listeners, I am, again, I said it in the beginning, I do things because I need the help myself. And I am hoping to see what it's like in the month of June to get off socials, to take them off my phone and just be without them for a month. Can I do it? I don't know. Maybe I won't be able to last more than a couple days, but I want to talk about that and what that looks like. And I think, Thekla, your expertise in addiction, and I want to put the caveat that I'm not throwing the word addiction out there lightly. And maybe you can rein me back in and say, please don't even use that word. That's not the right word. We'll talk about that. But what are some of the things I might go through, right? If I let them go, withdrawals, or like that kind of stuff that's very real with some addictions. So we'll talk more about that and break that down too. I just want to, before we end this segment, see if there are any, I don't know, anything we want the listeners to know about our own biases or our own what we bring.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I mean, I'm a white cisgender, you know, privileged person, and I come with that understanding and that orientation to the world. That doesn't mean that I don't also do the work of somatic abolitionism and unpacking my biases, and but like, please name and please call me out on when my bias or our bias comes up,
Mm-hmm.
because we want to acknowledge that and name that and be really honest and real about that. You heard me say at the beginning, I'm a citizen of the world, and I want to come at this context also not just from a citizen of the United States, but what else, it means to have a worldly perspective when it comes to this conversation. So holding ourselves accountable to that. And then, as I said, I'm going to be wearing multiple hats. I'm going to be wearing my hat as a clinical psychologist, as an addiction medicine expert, and I'm also going to be wearing my hat as a human and a mom and like deeply imperfect and going on this journey. I'm not going to let you go on this journey alone. I'm going to be alongside you with it. And I come from a different place and orientation to taking off some of the apps, but I'm going to do hard things too with you alongside of it so we can do it together. You asked a beautiful question about, can I use the term addiction? We are going to use it. Digital addiction is not in the diagnostic and statistical manual like our big book for psychology right now. Gambling addiction is, and so you'll hear me use proximity and terms like that. But we are going to be talking about withdrawal symptoms, and we are going to be talking about cravings, and we are going to be talking about aversions,
Mm.
because that's the reality of the situation that we're living in when it comes to our relationships with our tech. So, yeah, thanks for naming it, and I'll try my best, but feel free to tell me like, okay, she's taking off her clinical hat and she's putting on her mom hat right now. But the reality is we're multi-dimensional humans and who we are, and that makes us who we are. And um, so I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for naming those. And I also want to name too that we are both, and I hope this is evident in our conversation so far, but we're coming to this with the lens of curiosity and really, and I know it's hard. It really, I feel like it really is hard in this day and age to not come at it with some sort of judgment, because we all have our thoughts and opinions about, you see a 10-year-old whip out his iPhone and you might have a thought about that, right? But I'm really trying my hardest in all of this conversation to come at things without judgment, knowing that each family, each individual comes to this relationship with attention with their own experience and background and needs and, priorities and values. So, yeah, I hope if you spot me wearing what might look or sound like a judgment cap, call me on that too, because I'm really trying to maintain a curiosity in all of this and like how we're all in this together. So how do we do this together in a way that's going to help all of us?
So beautiful. So well said. Yeah. Clarity creates agency, and curiosity has to be at the foundation of that. So honored to join you on this curiosity adventure that we're going to go on, and anyone else who wants to join us. And yeah, call us out, audience, if you feel like we're going down the judgment track, because
Yes.
that's not the intention.
Yeah. And if this is interesting to you, listeners, if you are like, hey, I might want to try that with them, I'm going to hang on and watch what they say during May, and maybe in June, I'll try it too. Let us know. There are a couple ways you can do this. You could just email me, Megan at creamcitydreams.com, or you can hop over to the website, creamcitydreams.com. And like halfway down the page, there's a little widget where you can leave a message, 90 seconds. I think that's the max that you can leave, but 90 seconds to let me know how this is landing for you. Are you enjoying this? Is it resonating with you? Do you want to try it with us? Definitely leave an email contact if you do, because I'm thinking maybe we could create some kind of, I don't know, community around this, just an accountability check-in group or something. So if this is resonating and landing with you and you want to jump along this journey with us, let us know.
So fun. We'd love to hear from you. I love voice memos. I'd love to hear the tonality of your voice. Like, I'm freaked out. I'm so excited. I've been wanting to find a community to try this with. And remember, this is an experiment. So this is fun. There's like no right or wrong. I say all data is good data. So join us, hop on, leave a voice memo, send an email to Megan. She's got an incredible website. You can go on, check out all of her other amazing podcasts. So yeah, super fun.
Ooh, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I am so grateful to Thekla for joining me, for sharing her wisdom and her insight and her expertise in this field, and her humanity. It's nice to know that there are experts who are right there in the trenches with all of us figuring this out. So if this is something that you have been thinking about, and let's be honest, who's not thinking about this right now, whether you're raising kids or not, we're talking about looking inward. We're talking about looking at our own relationship to technology, to the attention economy, to what we have to give and what takes away and what detracts from what we have to give. So I hope you'll stick with us in these 4 segments that I am offering in the month of May before I hop back into my episodes with Milwaukee women. And on Fridays, I am going to keep up with the digest, where I may do a little bit more reflecting on what I'm noticing about my own technology use, and then dropping little bits of inspiration, because I know there are some pretty cool things happening in Milwaukee in the month of May. All right, we will be back next week, and we will be breaking down what's going on in the brain. Why do we find ourselves endlessly scrolling? What's happening up there that keeps us coming back? And maybe a little more to the point, what are these companies doing to reel us in? You're not going to want to miss this one. Back with Thekla next Wednesday. Until then, Milwaukee, keep on dreaming.